Luke stood in the bright, sun-drenched city center. The urban din surrounded her. She felt both lonely and overwhelmed by the vibrant energy. She was in such a rush that she failed to notice the sunlight or the car horns. She only saw other people as obstacles she needed to weave around. "Excuse me? Let me through," she barely managed to utter, her small voice swallowed by the noise. She raised her hands to her head, her breath catching. The immediate tension was heavy, making her heartbeat pound like a defeated war drum. She doubted herself. How did I get lost? I'm a local. I've been here 100 times. Right on the street corner, not far from where she stood, was a blonde-haired boy. That was Thomas. Just as she was struggling with confusion and the blonde-haired boy she recognized as Thomas turned his head. His face broke into a radiant smile, as if he had been waiting for her, and he raised his hand, waving naturally. "Oh, hey Luke." Luke's face was flushed, and a spark of happiness flashed in her mind. She stammered, her voice fumbling. Hi, Thomas." Luke tried to regain her composure and attempted a natural smile that came out stiff and fake. She tried to project her voice to sound calm, but her stammering still betrayed her. "I'm not, loth. HA. I was just, sightseeing. Yeah, checking out these buildings. They're amazing, right?" Luke couldn't keep up the pretense any longer. She felt disappointed in herself for wasting time. She bowed her head, her face flushed, and the apology escaped as a painful sigh, full of remorse. "I'm sorry, I'm late." Luke showed her surprise and confusion, asking about the movie that had started 10 minutes ago, and Thomas confirmed they still had 30 minutes. When Luke asked what Thomas had said again, Thomas finally revealed, "I figured since you've never been to this area, you'd definitely get lost and be late, so I bought tickets for the later showing already." Luke was completely surprised by Thomas's thoughtfulness. She realized he had anticipated her getting lost. Thomas continued to tease Luke. "Hey, I offered to drive you here, but you ended up turning me down again. My perfect plan." Luke's face was flushed and confused, only able to stutter. "Huh? Turned down? I didn't." Thomas didn't wait for Luke to calm down, taking her hand and pulling her along. "Come on, we have to catch the previews." She was completely confused, with only one thought echoing in her head. Holding hands. She tried to regain her senses. "I should pretend it's just casual before he gets suspicious." Luke awkwardly gestured with her eyes for Thomas to let go, but a humorous thought popped into Luke's mind. Or did he forget to let go? The story flashed back to September 2017, when the two first met. Luke stood in front of the club bulletin board, trying to motivate herself. "All right, Luke, joining a sport will be a good way to meet new people. Plus, regular exercise is good for my health." Suddenly, a stranger stood next to her. Luke was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice his presence at all. She was startled, her face flushing. Luke panicked internally. Oh my God. When did he get here? Was I so zoned out I didn't notice a stranger walking up? While trying to stay calm, Luke couldn't suppress her admiration because he was actually very handsome. Thomas the stranger looked at Luke and asked with a gentle smile, "Chuak, sorry, did you say something?" Luke realized she had spoken out loud, her face flushing. "Oh wait, did I say something out loud?" Seeing Luke's face flush and her not responding, Thomas seemed concerned. "Oh, are you all right, Fred? Your face is bright red." Luke, run away. The surging emotions and shame seemed too great. Instead of continuing the conversation, Luke made a final panicked decision. Abort mission. Thomas stared in astonishment after Luke's retreating figure. They ran away? Wow, they're fast. Do they do track and field or something? Thomas touched his mouth, worried that his breath smelled bad. He noticed the bag Luke had dropped. Thomas knelt to pick up the bag, feeling worried that he had scared the girl away. Thomas confusedly hugged the bag. He looked around, unsure what he should do with it. He then sat down on a stone bench, thinking, they'll surely come back when they realize they don't have their stuff. I'll keep them safe and apologize for startling them. Luke was now sitting hunched up under a tree. She felt desperate because she was an idiot. She reassured herself. Anyway, I'm never going to see him again. She realized she was missing everything. backpack. PHONE, wallet, keys. She immediately turned back and saw Thomas was still there. She began wrestling with her conscience because she messes everything up. She shouldn't have run. She tried to find an excuse to avoid having to meet him again. But the fear of losing her belongings won. Luke decided to stand up, go get my stuff, and apologize. After all, this is the first and last time I'll see him. Luke walked slowly, nervously, towards Thomas. Thomas immediately recognized her. Before Luke could apologize, Thomas took the initiative and said, "Hey, first off, I'm so sorry for scaring you." Luke was completely surprised that he was apologizing to her. Thomas smiled slightly and adjusted his glasses. "I guess I shouldn't have stood right next to you like that. It was my fault for startling you." Thomas smiled and held out the backpack. Luke quickly took the bag, sighed in relief, and thanked Thomas. As Luke was fumbling with the backpack, Thomas asked, "Hey, are you looking for a club or something? I saw you standing there for quite a while." Luke was startled. "Oh, I wanted to join a club." Then Thomas made a sudden suggestion, promising a fresh start. "How about the volleyball club? I'm a member there, and we're looking for more people." Luke fell into her familiar state of shock and confusion. An internal battle resonated in her mind. Volleyball. Oh my god. Should I do that? F and B and M J? She told herself. I'll have to see him every day. I'll have to talk to him and even sweat in front of him. I can't do that. But then, the image of Thomas smiling and his thoughtfulness when returning the bag appeared. Luke, thinking, but he's really the only person I want to be friends with at this university. He's kind and very handsome. This is the only chance. Finally, Luke took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. She looked up at Thomas, who was patiently waiting for her answer. She finally agreed to join the volleyball club. Thomas was visibly delighted. Thomas leaned in and said, "We practice at 7 p.m. in the gym. You can come there and I'll introduce you to the whole team." She smiled. All her self-doubt and embarrassment seemed to vanish. Luke and Thomas were sitting on a bench, chatting happily. Before parting, Thomas wanted Luke to text him so he could save her phone number. Luke, with a rapidly beating heart and cheeks flushed with happiness, diligently typed her phone number into his phone. Having saved the number, the two smiled and said goodbye to each other. Thomas waved goodbye with a radiant smile and a look full of anticipation. After he turned and walked away, Luke stood alone, her face still lingering with happiness for successfully getting his phone number. Luke felt extremely excited. Her heart was pounding, so hard it felt like it would burst out of her chest. However, her mood quickly fell into the darkness of self-doubt and insecurity. She thought he's only nice to me out of pity. There's no reason. Why anyone would want to be friends with me. Luke told herself not to hope too much, to avoid disappointment. The negative emotions were like a dark spiral, pulling her down. After struggling with negative thoughts, she finally got back to her room. Luke laid down on her bed. Next to her was her phone. In the dead of the night, a sound rang out. It was a text notification, which startled Luke awake. She woke up, rubbed her eyes, and picked up her phone, thinking, "Who's texting me this late?" When she opened the message, a sudden truth hit her, stunning her as Thomas had texted her. Her face suddenly lit up, her cheeks flushed with surprise and happiness. She covered her face, overwhelmed with shyness and joy. Luke began typing a reply hurriedly and full of confusion. "Hey, Thomas? What's up? It's late." Right after receiving the text from Thomas, Luke started a phone call with someone whose face was identical to hers. With braided hair that was her twin sister named Maria. Maria was still in bed, answering the call in a sleepy state. "Hey, Luke, what is it? It's late, ... Luke immediately said, "Hey, sorry, were you asleep?" Maria asked, "Haha, I'm trying to sleep here. What's on your mind?" Luke decided to share the sudden joy that had just happened. "I met someone new today, ... a very kind person. We talked for a long time, and he even asked for my number." Maria on the other end was extremely excited. "I want to hear all the details." "Wait. Remember, we also need to plan for the Star Catching Festival next month." Despite her happiness, Luke maintained her caution. "I'd rather not count my chickens before they hatch, but thank you for encouraging me to step out of my comfort zone, ... She smiled happily as she hung up, likely feeling much more at ease. In her joy and romantic hope, Luke silently wished to see the other person again. On the other side, Thomas smiled and felt very happy that the other person had replied to his text. Thomas recalled moments from their meeting and was sure she was a very shy person. He remembered the fun moments when they talked. They really lit up when we started talking about interests. However, the joy of the previous night did not last. The next day, Luke went to class feeling exhausted and listless as she had lost sleep due to thoughts swirling in her head. She walked through the university hallway, but her mind was immersed in self-doubt and anxiety. She walked into the empty classroom. She put her head down on the desk to sleep. Then, Luke looked up and saw Thomas and his friends. She mumbled, "Isn't that ... closing parentheses." Thomas was standing with two other friends, one with blue hair and one with dark, tanned brown hair. Thomas boasted, "I managed not to oversleep this time. ... closing parentheses. On the side, two girls were whispering about Thomas. "Oh my God, Luke is so charming ... closing parentheses. I heard he's single after breaking up with Tiffany ... closing parenthesis." The dark-haired boy leaned in and whispered to Thomas, "Looks like those girls over there are checking you out, Thomas. Want me to be your wingman?" Thomas refused. "Look how bad my last relationship was." "Me?" Luke sat alone, resting her chin on the desk with a sad expression. She sighed, seemingly trying to convince herself, "He's just nice to everyone ... You're not special ... closing parenthesis." Thomas was standing, chatting happily with his two friends. He turned and glanced towards Luke. Luke felt Thomas looking at her face flushing. She waved, muttering, "Thomas." Thomas then smiled and raised his hand to wave at Luke. Thomas turned back and said to his dark-haired friend, "Oops, sorry. I'm going to sit with another friend today." The dark-haired friend was disappointed. "Ah, but you always sit with us." Luke awkwardly thought to herself, "Did you just wave at him? You guys aren't even friends." Thomas walked over to where Luke was sitting and said, "Hey, Luke, I didn't realize you were in this class too. That's great. Do you mind if we sit together?" Luke hesitated for a moment, her internal self in turmoil, but then her face blushed and she gave a bright smile, agreeing with Thomas. Thomas smiled radiantly, his cheeks also flushed, thanking Luke. Once they were settled, Thomas started a conversation. "How did you sleep last night?" Luke replied. "Oh, I had a lot on my mind, so I didn't get much sleep." Thomas sighed and expressed his anxiety about his studies. "Me too. I'm dreading all the homework I'm going to have to do today. I know my math classes are going to kill my GPA this semester." Hearing that, Luke immediately blushed and tried to be helpful. I'm actually pretty good at math, so if you need help, let me know." Thomas smiled and thanked him. "Anytime." Luke then elaborated on her abilities. Thomas was completely impressed by her skills. Luke made a sincere offer. "I was thinking of tutoring to earn extra money for expenses. You probably don't need it, but I still wanted to offer just in case. I won't charge you, though." Thomas with an expression full of admiration. "You're seriously the best person ever, Luke." Then, Thomas's fear seemed to peak. He said, "Man, math haunts me even in my nightmares. It's like a horror movie, but the killer is a giant X with an X, and it gives me goosebumps." Luke giggled at Thomas's dramatics. Thomas leaned towards Luke, smiled, and admitted, "Haha, you're such a giant dork." Even though Luke's face was flushed with shyness and joy, Thomas, looking at Luke with a flushed face, said he was very willing to accept her tutoring offer. Both were so engrossed in conversation that they realized the professor had arrived. The dark-skinned professor, wearing a polite suit, greeted the students in the class. The dark-skinned professor was trying to turn on the projector. The professor began the lecture, standing next to a projection of a black hole on the board. This region is named Star Valley. While the professor was lecturing, Thomas leaned towards Luke and whispered, "Hey, do you have any lunch plans, Luke?" Luke replied in a whisper, "Oh, no, I, Dan Singo, T... closing parenthesis." He offered to take her out to lunch with him. Luke was completely surprised and flushed by the invitation. Thomas looked shy and confused. Luke whispered back, "Considering I've only been eating instant ramen lately, that sounds amazing." Thomas was startled and worried, whispering, "Hey, that's not healthy." Luke continued to ask Thomas about his free time. Eventually, they arranged to meet near the science buildings. Their conversation was suddenly cut short when the professor interrupted. "You too, up here." He sternly reminded them, "Please do not disrupt the class with private conversations. I'm watching you too." Thomas was embarrassed and raised his hand in apology. Luke blushed, bowed her head, and whispered an explanation. "I was just telling him about the star-catching festival." "Sorry?" While Luke was still confused, a hand gently placed a handwritten note on the desk. On the small piece of paper were neatly written words. "You're Luke, right? Sorry about sending you to get coffee for us. But I really appreciate your help. Lunch is 100% on me. Looking forward to it." Suddenly, the loud bell rang, signaling the end of class. The professor stood far away and said, "Class is dismissed." Thomas approached Luke and made a proposal. "Can we sit together starting now?" Luke immediately replied happily, "Oh, yes, absolutely." Both blushed and gave a radiant smile. Thomas leaned in and whispered in Luke's ear, making Luke widen her eyes in surprise. "Looking forward to our lunch date, Luke." "Luke," shyly exclaimed, "you too. Bye-bye. See you later." Thomas also waved goodbye with a happy and flushed face. After class, Luke was waiting alone outside a building. She seemed a little nervous and confused. Thomas appeared with a fresh face and waved hello. He walked up to where Luke was sitting and asked, "Hey, Luke, have you been waiting long?" Luke replied, a little awkwardly, "Oh, I just got here." The two started walking together. Thomas was smiling and seemed very excited about the date. Thomas said, "All right. Are you hungry?" Luke replied, "I'm starving." Thomas enthusiastically threw his hands in the air and shouted, "It's lunchtime." Luke smiled slightly, walking next to Thomas. As they were walking, Thomas seemed unsure of the way and turned to Luke with a slightly embarrassed look. "Sulfur monoxide, do you know the way from here? I'm still not really good at navigation on this side of the campus yet." Closing parentheses. Luke was startled. They finally arrived at a famous diner called Nice Burger. Thomas exclaimed when he saw the crowd, "Oh, wow, it's crowded today." "I knew this place was popular, but wow." Luke stood next to him, her face showing surprise and slight overwhelm by the hustle and bustle. Luke felt even more stressed by the crowd. She looked down, clutching her hands. She told herself, "Calm down, Luke." Thomas looked inside the diner with a slightly worried expression. He thought to himself, hopefully the lines inside aren't too bad. Thomas noticed Luke's tension and turned to ask kindly, "Do you want to go somewhere else? Perhaps somewhere less crowded?" Luke managed to answer, "No, I'll be fine." Thomas's offer seemed to encourage Luke. He collected himself, his expression brighter. Luke said firmly, "I can do it. Let's go." Thomas blushed out of surprise, and perhaps because of her action, he thought to himself, "They're so cute." Thomas was the one who ordered and paid for both of them. Thomas brought the burgers and drinks to the table. Both began eating. Thomas chuckles while eating. He asked, "How is I?" Luke took a bite of the burger, telling herself, "Sweet, sweet, delicious, processed protein." Then she looked at Thomas and said, "Thanks for the food. I'll pay you back." Thomas smiled brightly and shook his head slightly. "Nitrogen monoxide I like treating my friends, so I hope we can make these lunch dates a regular thing." Luke was still concerned about the relationship. She asked, hesitantly, "What about your other friends? Are you sure you don't want to hang out with them instead?" Luke was still pondering why Thomas chose to hang out with her instead of his other friends. She looked down, her face flushed, and vocalized her deep insecurity. "I'm nothing special, ... Closing parenthesis. Thomas looked at Luke with a determined expression and said, "I like you." Thomas explained, "I think you're really easy to talk to. Besides, a lot of my other friends are really more like acquaintances. They don't really like the same stuff as you and me, ... so I never get a chance to talk to anyone about it, closing parentheses. This made Luke panic. She thought to herself, couldn't he have started with that instead of I like you? He's going to give me a heart attack. Thomas shifted to a bright and candid expression, openly expressing his desire for friendship. Haha, I know we only met yesterday, so I hope I'm not being too pushy or taking up your time. Like I said, I really like you, and I hope we can be good friends. Luke seemed shy, her face slightly flushed, and she replied with a stammer. Oh, why you're nice, too, closing parenthesis. It's really fun talking to you, So I hope we can be good friends too, closing parenthesis. Internally, both of them were feeling very happy. Thomas continued with an invitation to solidify their friendship. Oh, well, would you be interested in playing Dungeons & Dragons? Maybe a one-on-one campaign, or I could invite a few friends to join. Luke smiled broadly and agreed to both, being friends and playing Dungeons & Dragons. I'd love to. After they both agreed to play D&D, Thomas continued discussing the meeting. Luke suggested more about the D&D game. We could always do a one-shot to get you used to my game master style. Thomas continued to invite Luke to his place to hang out and watch anime together. Luke asked, Is your apartment nearby? You drove here, right? Thomas replied, Yeah, it's super close. I usually park on the east side of campus. Luke turned pale out of surprise and panic. I'm in the West Orms. That's totally opposite. Then why would you? Thomas smiled and admitted, I wanted to make sure you got home safely. Thomas quickly regained his composure and frankly asked about Luke's free time. Luke with flushed cheeks replied, Usually, evenings and weekends. It depends on how the tryouts go. Suddenly, Thomas's face completely changed expression. He remembered something important he had forgotten. I completely forgot that there are tryouts this weekend. Thomas turned back to look at Luke, trying to give a forced smile to hide his embarrassment. Thomas bent down to dial his phone for a call. While dialing, he muttered, Wait a minute. Thomas said to Luke, Hey, do you mind if I step away for a second? I need to call my dad. Luke replied, Oh, sure, go ahead. Thomas started the call. Hey Dad, quick chat about this Saturday. His face was very serious. Yes, ... double quotes. Finally, Thomas ended the call with a tone full of resignation and reluctant acceptance. It's okay, I can do whatever you and Mom think is best. Luke looked towards Thomas and mumbled to herself. He looks really stressed. ... While Luke was deep in thought, one of her twin sisters, Maria, rushed over and hugged her. After getting up, Maria looked at Luke with a curious gaze and asked, Oh, are you having lunch with someone? Luke continuing, Yeah, it's that guy I told you about. Maria smiled slyly. Luke, confused, explained the current situation in detail. Her cheeks flushed. Apparently we're in the same class. So he invited me to lunch. He just stepped out to take a call. Luke, with a flushed face, tried to prevent Maria from misunderstanding. Maria excited. Oh my God, it's just like in a romance movie. While the two friends were engrossed in conversation, Thomas returned and waved hello to Maria. Maria whispered to Luke, Is that him? Luke whispering, Obviously. Thomas asked, Wow, you two are twins. That's amazing. Thomas approached, and Luke introduced him. Thomas, this is my little sister, Maria, ... Maria interjected, her eyes wide with anger. Wait, little sister, you're only 3 minutes older than me. Introduce me properly, you idiot. Thomas witnessed the scene, giving a warm smile. Haha, you two are funny. Maria suddenly changed her demeanor. She gave a radiant smile, turning to Thomas. Sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to ask Luke about the Star Catching Festival next month. Are you planning to go? Thomas enthusiastically replied, I've been really hoping to go. My family moved to Star Valley a few years ago, but this will be my first time going. Maria put her hand on Luke's shoulder and urged her. Luke, you should take him along. I'm planning to go with you and others. Luke, confused and blushing, replied, Oh, only if he wants to, ... Thomas didn't hesitate. He smiled at the implied invitation. I'd love to. Maria quickly praised the Star Catching Festival, assuring Thomas it would be an amazing experience. Having completed her matchmaking task, Maria hurriedly said goodbye to go to class. After the encounter in the cafeteria, Luke returned to her busy student life. She was in a magnificent library named Celestite, with ancient architecture. Luke sat in front of her laptop. Her face showed tension and fatigue as she concentrated on her work. Suddenly, a sound rang out, Thomas's text message. "Hey Luke, how are classes going?" Luke's face immediately lit up. All her tension vanished, replaced by a radiant smile. She quickly typed a reply, "Too much math." Thomas responded with a reassuring text. "Haha, poor thing. If you need help, let me know." Then, he asked further, "Which library are you at?" Luke replied with a selfie. "It's the super fancy one near the art buildings." Luke looked at the photo. Then she realized it was a selfie of herself posing by the fountain. Luke held her head, her face grimacing in embarrassment. Suddenly, her phone rang again. Luke looked down at the screen, her eyes wide and her heart reacting intensely. It was a text message with a photo. In the photo was Thomas smiling radiantly, with a fountain statue in the background. "I'm near the fountain on the first floor." Although feeling extremely ashamed and trying to cover her face, she still couldn't stop herself from chuckling. "I know I shouldn't hope too much, but he's so cute." After sending the message, Luke quickly pulled herself together, trying to finish her work before Thomas arrived. Thomas appeared. He walked into the Celestite library with a bag in hand. Thomas felt incredibly excited inside. "Oh wow, this place is super fancy, ... I'm so happy." Thomas gave a warm smile, his eyes twinkling. He started thinking about her character development, ... Studying math? What kind of character development is this? Alright, just gotta find her. Thomas found Luke sitting at a table. He smiled radiantly. He walked up to Luke's table and greeted her. "Hey, Luke." Luke, looking up, blushing. "Oh, hi, Thomas." He leaned in and asked politely, pointing to the empty seat next to her. "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" Luke, blushing, replied. "Go ahead." After settling in, Thomas smiled and asked Luke, "Oh, Luke, have you had dinner yet?" Luke seemed a little confused. She looked up at Thomas with a flushed face. Luke hesitantly. Then, Thomas took out a package of food from the bag he was carrying, which he had bought for her on the way there. Luke looked at him with astonishment. "You ... did that?" Thomas explained, "Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. I wanted to get you something to thank you for helping me on such short notice. And you mentioned that you really don't eat anything but ramen ... Luke asked, "What did you get me?" Thomas opened the food package. He revealed, "I wasn't entirely sure what you liked, so I bought an extra burger, like the one you ordered for lunch, and some spaghetti." Then, Thomas gave Luke 2 bottles of water from the vending machine. Luke, completely stunned by Thomas's thoughtfulness, gave a radiant smile and said to Thomas, "You're so sweet, Thomas." In that moment, Thomas's heart seemed to sing. His cheeks flushed, a powerful, unnamed emotion surged, a shy, radiant smile. Thomas said, "Like I said, it's a small thank you for helping me." Luke opened the box, her eyes wide with surprise. The simple food became a bridge for sweet emotions. A soft thank you from Luke, sincere like a breeze, and a simple reply from Thomas, yet full of unspoken friendship and affection. Faced with such sincerity, Luke couldn't help but be confused. Her cheeks slightly flushed, but hidden deep in her eyes was deep care. Lukewarm, caring voice. "So, what kind of math do you need help with?" Thomas replied, "Statistics ... Then, a light flashed in Thomas's blue eyes, a full sense of confidence, a feeling of joy knowing he would be helped by Luke. Thomas clasped his hands, unable to hide his excitement, saying, "You're seriously the best." A tender look, a little awkwardness. Thomas said, "All right, here's my textbook and my notes. 2... Luke took the notebook, her eyes scanning the writing and drawings. Luke was surprised and a little confused, asking, "Half of these notes are incomplete and the other half is just drawings." Double quotes, Thomas mumbled in reply. "I might have zoned out. ... Double quotes. What happens next? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to follow the next episode of Starcatcher.